She had commanded operating rooms. She had no badge, no title, just quiet hands and cheap Navy scrubs. To the arrogant chief of surgery, she was invisible. A piece of furniture, someone to bark orders at. To her petty supervisor, she was a body paid to push gurneys and mop up blood. But beneath the Navy scrubs and the silent obedience, a secret was hiding. A secret forged in the chaotic wards of a collapsing healthcare system. And tonight, an ice storm is about to reveal that secret. When the hospital's best doctor fails and a man is dying on the table, the invisible woman will have to make a choice. Stay silent or show them who she really is. Piedmont Grace Hospital. The hiss of the automatic doors was a sound Maya Washington associated with the cold. At Piedmont Grace Hospital, the doors hissed open to admit the biting Atlanta wind, and they hissed open to admit the sick. Tonight, they were doing both relentlessly. A February ice storm was strangling the city, a crystalline assault that turned the highways into skating rinks and the skyline into a frosted blur. The ER, the city's Level 1 trauma center, was a warren of strained fluorescent light, frantic squeaking motion, and a pervasive layered smell. It was the smell of antiseptic, burned coffee, damp coats, and the faint coppery tang of fear. Maya pushed her empty gurney along the yellow linoleum line, her navy scrubs a badge of absolute invisibility. She was a ghost in the machine, a patient transport orderly, a body paid to move other bodies, empty or full. She navigated the paths of nurses and residents who saw the gurney, but never, not once, the person pushing it. Her hands, long-fingered and dark brown, were steady on the gurney's cold, vibrating metal rail. These were hands that had once held the frantic, slippery pulse of a ruptured aorta under the white-hot lights of her own operating theater. Hands that had sutured tissue finer than wet silk, closing wounds that seemed impossible to close. Now they were chapped and calloused from pushing, from breaking down boxes, from cleaning, from wiping down vinyl mats. They were hands that no one saw. This, she thought, her breath fogging in the cold draft from the door, was not a job. It was a penance, a purgatory of bleached surfaces and beeping alarms. A life lived in the margins. Washington, Maya Washington. The voice was sharp, a nasal drill that cut through the ER's dull roar. Maya stopped. The name Washington still sounding foreign and wrong, a costume she couldn't get used to. She was Dr. Adebayo. But Adebayo was a person from a dead life, a life that had ended in flames and government raids. Washington was the name on the plastic badge that hung from her pocket, tucked away so it wouldn't snag. Patricia Coleman, the transport supervisor, stood with her hands on her hips, a clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. Patricia was a woman who had mastered her small kingdom, and she wielded her small power like a broadsword, finding satisfaction in the minor terrors she could inflict. "You're floating, Washington. Bay 4 needs a full cleanup and you're taking a scenic tour. I've had you on the tracker. You've been en route for 10 minutes. Maya felt the familiar hot prickle of humiliation. It started at the back of her neck and spread to her cheeks. She looked at Patricia, her face a carefully constructed mask of neutrality. She had to swallow before she could speak. "Yes, Miss Coleman. I just dropped the septic patient at CT." "I don't care about CT," Patricia snapped, her voice loud enough for the triage nurses to hear. "I care about my department. Bay 4 is a mess. Blood and glass. You are paid to push, not to park. Get it done." Maya nodded once. "Yes, Miss Coleman." She didn't say that the septic patient had coded in the elevator, and she had spent 3 minutes bagging him, keeping him alive until the code team arrived. She didn't say that her hands, even through the gloves, were still shaking from the effort, from the memory of what they used to do. She simply turned the gurney, the rubber wheels squeaking in protest on the linoleum. "Breathe," she told herself. A familiar mantra, in through the nose, out through the mouth. You are Maya Washington. You mop up. You push. You are invisible. It is safer this way. In Lagos, she had commanded a staff of 30 surgeons. She had trained residents from 3 countries. She had argued with military officials and health ministers. Here, she was being reprimanded by a woman whose most complex daily task was a staffing roster. The irony was so bitter, it tasted like acid in the back of her throat. As she turned the gurney toward Bay 4, the main ER doors flew open again, not with the sigh of a normal arrival, but with the bang of a crisis. A whirlwind of white coats and dark blue scrubs entered, parting the sea of waiting patients. At its center was Dr. Marcus Sterling, the chief of trauma surgery. He was a tall man with close-cropped gray hair and eyes the color of steel, moving with an athletic grace that belied his 55 years. He was brilliant, a legend in this place. He was also arrogant, impatient, and utterly intolerant of everything that was not him. I want him typed and crossed. I want a full-body pan scan before he even thinks about stabilizing, and I want OR3 prepped for an X-lap. Sterling was barking, not at anyone in particular, but at the air around him, expecting his orders to be plucked and obeyed. His voice was a rich, confident baritone that carried absolute authority. He pivoted, already thinking 3 steps ahead, and nearly collided with Maya's gurney. "Watch it," he snapped. His cold gaze didn't land on her. It landed on the gray object obstructing his path. Maya instinctively pulled the gurney back, her heart thudding with a sudden, stupid jolt of fear. He hadn't seen her. He was already 5 steps past her, his team of residents and nurses scrambling in his wake like ducklings. Maya let out a breath. She was beneath his notice, and for that she was usually grateful. But as she stood there, invisible, her eyes drifted to the monitor he had just left. The X-ray of the incoming patient was still on the screen. It was a mess, a chest full of what looked like shrapnel from an industrial accident. Her mind, the part of her that was Dr. Adebayo, clicked on. The residents saw the shattered ribs, the hemothorax, the obvious bloody chaos. But her eyes? Her eyes? They didn't just see the obvious. Her gaze narrowed, her head tilting. There, just behind the sternum, a subtle widening of the mediastinum, a blur like a thumbprint on a wet photograph. He's bleeding into his chest. Yes, she thought, her mind working with an old familiar speed. The residents will put in a chest tube. They will get a liter of blood. They will think they are winning. But that shadow. Her blood ran cold. That's not the bleed, that's the aorta. It's dissecting, it's tearing. He's not a chest tube and an X-lap. He's a code on the table. He's dead in 20 minutes. One of the residents, Dr. Jennifer Martinez, a young woman with earnest eyes and perpetually frantic energy, was nodding at Sterling. "Yes, Chief, we'll get right on it. Chest tube first, then up to the scanner." "Good. Don't waste my time, Martinez," Sterling said, and was gone. Maya felt her fingers tighten on the gurney's metal rail until her knuckles ached. She wanted to scream. "You're missing it. You're all missing it. You're looking at the explosion, not the shockwave." But she was Maya Washington, the orderly. She pushed her gurney toward Bay 4, the squeaking wheel a pathetic rhythmic counterpoint to the klaxons blaring in her head. She opened the supply closet, the sharp chemical smell of bleach and clean linens washing over her. It was the smell of her new life. Her hands, the hands of a surgeon, picked up a mop. The ice storm, relentless, was no longer just an inconvenience. It was a siege. The wind howled, a low, mournful sound that seeped through the window seals, making the glass rattle. The radio crackled with reports of a massive pileup on I-285, the perimeter highway, a chain reaction of 18-wheelers and commuter cars on the black ice. A catastrophe. The hospital PA system, usually a calm, feminine voice, clicked on with a burst of static that made everyone flinch. Code Omega, multi-vehicle incident. All available surgical staff to the emergency department. All elective procedures canceled. Code Omega. The relative strained calm of the ER vanished. It was as if a dam had broken. The hissing doors became a revolving gate of human misery. Gurneys clattered. Medics shouted, their faces red and raw from the cold. The air filled with the sounds of wet, cold clothing being cut away, the cries of the terrified, and the metallic reek of fresh, warm blood. The floor, so recently mopped, was now smeared with slush and red-black trails. Patricia Coleman was in her element, her voice rising to a shriek. "Washington! Jenkins! Get these corridors clear! We need a pathway! I want 2 orderlies on gurney duty at the ambulance bay now. Move, move, move!" Maya worked her body on autopilot. She moved gurneys, restocked carts with gauze and saline bags, and cleared pathways. But her mind was detached, her old training taking over, a program running silently in the background. She was triaging without touching, a habit she couldn't break. That one, she thought, seeing a woman clutching her arm, stable, probable fracture, green tag. That one. A man with a vacant 1,000-yard stare and pale, waxy skin, internal bleeding. Shock. Needs a line now, red tag, that one. A teenager with a piece of metal embedded in his leg. Loud, scared, but the wound is clean and he's perfusing. Yellow tag. He can wait. This silent internal rhythm was a torture. It was a constant screaming reminder of the skills she was forced to suppress, to lock away like a shameful secret. Her hands ached to intervene, to palpate an abdomen, to listen for breath sounds, to fix, but she just pushed. Her navy scrubs the color of her confinement. Then a new ambulance screamed up to the bay, its siren dying with a pathetic, wounded animal sound. The medics burst through, their faces grim, a cloud of frozen breath preceding them. "Trauma Alpha!" one of them shouted, his voice hoarse. "Male, mid-40s, crush injury, pinned for 30 minutes, BP 80 palpable. Sats are dropping, 70s and falling. He's unstable." They rushed him to Trauma Bay 2, the main resuscitation room known as the Pit. It was the room reserved for the dying. Because the ER was so inundated, all senior staff, including Dr. Sterling, were already in surgery or managing other critical patients. The first physician to the gurney was Dr. Jennifer Martinez, the first-year resident. She was alone. "Get me 2 large-bore IVs, O-neg blood on the warmer, and get me a full trauma panel," Martinez ordered, her voice a half-octave higher than usual. Maya was just outside the bay, having cleared the previous patient's gurney. Patricia Coleman spotted her and shoved a heavy green oxygen tank toward her. "Bay 2, they need a fresh tank. In and out, Washington. Don't contaminate anything. Don't touch anything. You're a liability in there." Maya nodded, her face blank. She gripped the cold, heavy steel and wheeled the tank into the bay. The moment she crossed the threshold, the atmosphere changed. The general chaos of the ER focused into a single point of desperate, condensed panic. The light in Bay 2 was painfully bright, a sterile, buzzing fluorescence that made everyone's skin look like wax. The patient was ashen, his chest a grotesque, concave map of purple and black. The monitors were a symphony of alarms, a discordant, shrieking chorus of failure. Dr. Martinez was in over her head. "Sats are dropping, 65%! A nurse shouted. "BP is 70 over 40, 60 over 30. He's crashing." Martinez, her face slick with sweat that fogged her protective glasses, was following the protocol she had memorized. "He's got a flailed chest. I need a chest tube kit. Get me the chest tube kit now." A nurse slapped the sterile kit onto a tray. Martinez's hands, clad in sterile blue gloves, fumbled with the plastic wrap. She tore it, and the scalpel clattered to the floor. "Damn it! Another! Hurry!" She ripped open the second kit, scattering its contents. She grabbed the betadine swab, her hands shaking so badly she streaked the man's side instead of cleaning it. Maya stood by the wall, her hand on the cold valve of the oxygen tank. She was supposed to leave, but she couldn't. Her feet were lead. She wasn't watching the fumbling resident. Her eyes were locked on the patient's neck. The veins, the jugular, were distended, standing out like taut, swollen ropes. His trachea, she could see it even from the doorway, was slightly, almost imperceptibly, deviated to the left. "She's wrong," Maya's mind screamed. "He's dying. He's dying because this girl is wrong. It's not just a flail chest. He's got a tension pneumothorax. The air is trapped. It's crushing his right lung. It's pushing his heart." Martinez finally got the kit open. She picked up the scalpel. She was shaking. She palpated the patient's side, her fingers pressing randomly. "Fourth intercostal. No, fifth. I can't feel the rib." She was wasting seconds. Precious, irreplaceable seconds. "Vitals are gone. He's in P," the nurse yelled, her voice cracking. The monitor confirmed it. The chaotic rhythm dissolved into a flat, pulseless electrical activity. The long, unbroken, terrifying beep of the flat line filled the room, a sound that meant the end of the world. The patient was, for all intents and purposes, dead. "Start compressions," Martinez yelled, her voice a panicked squeak. She climbed onto the stool and placed her hands on the man's crushed chest, beginning the rhythmic, brutal thumping of CPR. Patricia Coleman was at the doorway, her face pale. "Washington, I told you to get out. Get that old gurney out of here. They need the crash cart." But Maya was frozen. She wasn't watching Patricia. She was watching the monitor. Compressions were doing nothing. The man's color was getting worse, a deep cyanotic blue. "No, you fool," she thought. The words a silent shriek. "You're pushing against a wall. The heart is being squeezed. You are compressing a heart that's already in a vice. You're pushing air into a lung that is already collapsed. You're not saving him. You're killing him faster." "Washington, move!" Patricia shouted again, taking a step into the room to grab her arm. Maya ignored her. In that second, the orderly vanished. The Navy scrubs, the humiliation, the supervisor, the rules, the fear of being fired, it all evaporated. There was only the patient, the flat line, and the ticking clock. She let go of the oxygen tank. The metal clanged softly against the wall. She took 2 silent, measured steps, her navy-scrubbed legs moving with a purpose that felt alien and familiar all at once. She reached the gurney. She placed her left hand firmly on Dr. Martinez's shoulder, her right hand covering hers, and pushed her off the patient's chest. It was not a gentle push. It was a shove. Martinez stumbled back, crashing into the IV pole. "What are you doing?" Martinez gasped, her eyes wide with terror and disbelief. "Get away! Get off him!" "Stop compressions," Maya commanded. Her voice, it was not the quiet, subservient whisper of Maya Washington. It was the voice of Dr. Nkechi Adebayo. It was low, accented with the musical cadence of West Africa, and absolutely calm. It cut through the alarms and the panic like a chilled scalpel. "You are killing him," she said, her eyes on the patient. "He has tension pneumothorax and cardiac tamponade, both." Before Martinez could form a word, before Patricia could scream for security, Maya's quiet hands were in motion. Her eyes scanned the tray. She saw a 14-gauge angiocath, a long, thick-bore needle in an orange-capped case. She snatched it. "You can't do that. You're an orderly," Martinez cried, reaching for her, her hand wavering. Just as her hand found the landmark, the main doors to the trauma bay burst open. Dr. Marcus Sterling, his own scrubs dotted with blood from his last surgery, stormed in, drawn by the code blue alarm and the commotion. "What in God's name is going on in my trauma bay?" His eyes took in the scene. The panicked resident, the apoplectic supervisor, and the transport orderly, his transport orderly, poised over his patient with a needle. "Security!" Sterling roared, lunging forward. "Head tackle her! Stop her!" He was too late. Maya didn't flinch. Her eyes didn't waver. Her hand was a blur. She found the spot, second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line, a landmark she knew as well as her own face, a place she had found on rattling gurneys in field hospitals, with no power and gunfire in the distance. With a single fluid, flawless motion, she sank the needle into the man's chest, right over the rib. There was a sudden resisting pop as the needle breached the parietal pleura, and then a violent, wet hissing sound. It was the sound of a life returning. A rush of trapped air, pink and bloody, sprayed from the catheter hub, misting the front of her scrubs. On the monitor, the PEA line, blip, blip, and then a rhythm. A weak, thready sinus rhythm. The BP cuff automatically inflated, flashing a number, 80/50. The patient took a single gasping, spontaneous breath. The room fell into a stunned, absolute silence, broken only by the new, steady beep, beep, beep of the monitor. Dr. Sterling was frozen, his hand still outstretched, his mouth slightly open. He had just watched a janitorial-level employee perform a perfect needle decompression, a procedure that had made his own resident freeze. Dr. Martinez was leaning against the wall, her legs visibly shaking, her face the color of bone. Maya dropped the used needle into the sharps container. She looked at the monitor. The pressure was already ticking down again. 80. 75. 70. "It is not enough," she stated, her voice flat. "The lung is clear. Now the heart." The patient was still crashing. The pneumothorax was fixed, but the second problem, the one she had also seen, the one the compressions had made worse, remained. Before Dr. Sterling could find his voice, Maya's hand was moving again. She scanned the central line kit that Martinez had failed to open. She saw it, a long spinal needle and a 60cc syringe. She attached them with a single practiced twist. She was positioning herself for a subxiphoid pericardiocentesis, a high-risk blind procedure to drain the blood from the sac around the heart. This time, Sterling found his voice. It was a strangled order. "Stop! Stop right there! That's a blind stick! You'll puncture his ventricle. You'll kill him." Maya did not look at him. She looked at the monitor, where the weak rhythm was already degrading. The QRS complex is widening into sloppy, dying waves. "He is already dead," she said softly. Her technique was a thing of terrifying beauty. It was not the fumbling, textbook, say-a-prayer method of a resident. It was a lost art, a technique from a different, harder kind of medicine. Her left hand palpated the tiny, soft space between the xiphoid process and the left costal margin. Her right hand inserted the needle. The angle was perfect. 45 degrees aimed at the patient's left shoulder. Feel the pop. A voice from her past whispered in her mind. It was the voice of her mentor, Dr. Olufemi Okonkwo, a man with hands like iron and a touch like silk. He was gone now, lost in the collapse of a hospital that no longer existed. Feel the pop, Nkechi. Don't just look for the blood. Feel the heart, and then stop. She advanced the needle, gently aspirating. 1 centimeter, 2, nothing, 3. Then a subtle give. The resistance changed. She felt the needle breach the tough, fibrous pericardial sac. She stopped. Her hand was as steady as granite. She pulled back on the plunger. A rush of dark, non-clotting blood, the color and consistency of motor oil, flooded the 60cc syringe. On the monitor, the effect was instantaneous and absolute. The degrading wide complex rhythm shrank. It tightened. It strengthened. Beep, 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 beep. A strong, steady sinus rhythm. The BP value flashed. 100/70, 105/75, 110/80. The patient's eyelids fluttered. Maya held the syringe full of the blood that had been choking the life from the man and let out a single breath she hadn't known she was holding. The room was silent. The only sound was the monitor, a beacon of life. The air smelled of ozone, iron, and the sharp sting of alcohol swabs. Dr. Marcus Sterling stared. He stared at the syringe. He stared at the monitor. He stared at the calm, navy-scrubbed woman who had just saved a man's life twice in 30 seconds with a poise he hadn't seen in a decade. He turned to the head nurse, who was standing by the monitor, her own hands over her mouth. His voice was a dry, stunned whisper, barely audible over the beeping. "My God, who trained her?" Two large security guards, summoned by Patricia's earlier shout, skidded to a halt in the doorway, their hands on their belts, utterly confused. They saw a stable patient, a calm doctor, and an orderly holding a syringe. Patricia Coleman finally found her voice. It was shrill, trembling with a mixture of fear and fury. She assaulted that patient. Dr. Sterling, she attacked Dr. Martinez. Arrest her. She's insane. She could have killed him. Dr. Sterling held up a single pale hand. He didn't look at Patricia. He didn't look at the guards. He silenced the room with that one simple gesture. He walked slowly, deliberately toward Maya. His footsteps were the only sound. Maya watched him approach. The cold, adrenaline-fueled certainty of the procedure was fading, leaving behind the familiar hollow ache of her real life. She felt the blood on her gloves, the blood on her navy scrubs. She braced for the shouting, for the handcuffs, for the end of this fragile, humiliating life she had built. She had crossed a line. She had revealed herself. And now, the consequences. Sterling stopped a foot in front of her. He didn't look angry. He looked hollowed out, humbled. His steel-gray eyes were not looking at her with arrogance. They were looking at her with a dawning, terrifying clarity. He saw her. "Your name," he said. It was not a question. It was a demand. "Maya Washington," she replied, her voice quiet again, the mask slipping back into place. She carefully placed the filled syringe on the sterile tray, then began to peel the bloody gloves from her hands, finger by finger. "I am a transport orderly." "That's a lie," Sterling said, his voice quiet but intense, a low vibration in the small room. "That was not a transport orderly's procedure. That was not any orderly's procedure. That," he pointed at the needle, his finger trembling slightly, "was a Marfan method pericardiocentesis. I've read about it. I've never seen it done. Not like that. Not blind. My residents would have failed. I would have cracked his chest. You saved us 10 minutes and you saved his life." He paused, his eyes boring into hers. "I will ask you one more time. Who are you?" Maya dropped the soiled gloves into the red biohazard bin. She looked at the patient whose skin was already pinking, his chest rising and falling with the ventilator. She looked at Dr. Martinez, who was staring at her with a look of pure, unadulterated awe, her earlier panic replaced by a profound, professional shame. She looked at Patricia Coleman, whose face was a mask of dawning, sickening, confused horror. Finally, she met the chief of surgery's steel-gray eyes. The invisibility was gone. "In this hospital, I am Maya Washington," she said. And for the first time, she let her accent, her real voice come through. It was thick, clear, and proud, with the resonance of West Africa, the musical lilt of Yoruba and Igbo, mixed with the crisp English of Lagos. "In my home, I was Dr. Nkechi Adebayo, Chief of Cardiothoracic Trauma, Lagos University Teaching Hospital." The words landed in the silent room with the weight of an anvil. Dr. Adebayo, Chief of Trauma. The revelation hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Dr. Marcus Sterling, the legend of Piedmont Grace, just stared. The name clicked. He had heard that name, read her papers on austere surgical techniques and trauma management in resource-limited settings. He'd been reading her work for years, citing her studies on damage control surgery. He closed his eyes for a single long second. He processed the ice storm, the Code Omega, the refugee crisis, the impossible-to-pass foreign credentialing exams, the years of bureaucratic hell. It all snapped into a single horrifying, clear picture. He had a world-class trauma chief mopping his floors. When he opened his eyes, the arrogance was gone. The shock was gone. He was a surgeon again, a colleague looking at an equal. He nodded once, a short, sharp motion of profound, urgent respect. He turned, his energy snapping back. But it was different now. It was not the energy of ego. It was the energy of command. "Patricia," he said, his voice sharp and cold as the ice outside, "get out of my trauma bay." She flinched as if struck. "But doctor," The protocol? Out now. She fled. He pointed at the resident. Martinez, stop hyperventilating and book trauma or one. Now, get me the chief of cardio. Tell him we have a pericardial window to sew up and a thoracic surgeon is meeting him there. He turned back to Maya. He didn't see the Navy scrubs. He didn't see the orderly. He saw, truly and completely, Dr. Nkechi Adebayo. He gestured to the automated scrub sink just outside the bay, its green sensor light glowing invitingly. Dr. Adebayo, he said, his voice formal, absolute, and carrying the full weight of his authority. I'll need an assisting surgeon. Scrub in. Dr. Adebayo, he said, his voice formal, absolute, and carrying the full weight of his authority. I'll need an assisting surgeon. Scrub in. What happened next? Dr. Nkechi Adebayo's story didn't end in that trauma bay. After saving the patient's life, Dr. Sterling personally championed her case through the medical board's credentialing process. Within 6 months, she was back in the operating room where she belonged. Today, she serves as the Associate Chief of Trauma Surgery at Piedmont Grace Hospital, training the next generation of surgeons in the austere techniques she learned in Lagos. Her story became a catalyst for change. The hospital established a foreign medical graduate fast-track program, helping dozens of highly qualified international physicians navigate the complex credentialing process. Many of them, like Dr. Adebayo, had been working in positions far below their training and expertise. Patricia Coleman retired early. Dr. Jennifer Martinez became one of Dr. Adebayo's most dedicated students and now regularly credits her with saving not just the patient's life that night, but her own career as a surgeon. And Maya Washington, that name was retired. Dr. Nkechi Adebayo never hid again. If this story touched your heart, please share it. There are thousands of brilliant doctors, nurses, engineers, and professionals working jobs far beneath their qualifications simply because of immigration barriers and credential recognition issues. Their talents are hidden, but their potential is limitless. Want more inspiring true stories? Subscribe to our channel for tales of extraordinary people who refuse to let circumstances define their destiny. Hit the like button if you believe talent and skill deserve to be recognized, no matter where they come from. Share your thoughts. Do you know someone with a hidden talent or qualification? Have you ever felt invisible in your workplace? Leave a comment below. We read every single one. Your next story is waiting. Click the video on screen now for another incredible journey of resilience, courage, and redemption.